there was a concentration.
Well, I guess it's
right. So I will call the meeting to order, and I'll start by welcoming councillors, submitters, members of the public. And just to let everybody know that the meeting, which is being held in the supper room by Hinga Centre, Martinborough Town Hall, is being live streamed, and it will be available to be viewed on the council's YouTube channel. If an emergency happens and we have to exit the room in a hurry, you may exit by the door that you came in or the door behind me. Please assemble outside by the playground, and please remain there until you've been until we've been given the all clear. So I will start with a karakia. Ngā mihi o te rā, ki te whānau e hui hui nei. Kia tau te rangi Māori ai, kia whakatapua tātou me ngā mea. E whakapono ana tātou haumi e ui e
tai.
So that greets everybody that is here. Let us be peaceful and let us respect each other. And we'll now move to the formal business. Do we have any apologies? I don't believe we do. So we'll move on. Does anybody have a conflict of interest? Okay, there are none. So now we're going to hear two submissions or submitters. And just a reminder that this is to elected members, that we're here to approach the hearing with an open mind and take into account all written and oral submissions, and that we're here to listen, not to debate, but obviously at the end of each submission we may ask questions to clarify. And so if I can now speak to our first submitter, who is Joe Woodcock of Greytown. Can I start by assuring you that councillors have read your submission, and indeed we will have a copy in front of us, and we now invite you to speak in support of it. It's an opportunity to expand and to focus on some key points. You've got 10 minutes. We would suggest you left some time for questions, but since we only have two submitters today, I'm certainly prepared to be liberal with the time. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Afternoon, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for your time today to allow me to speak to my submission. And in the agenda pack dated the 19th of July, you will receive, as Martin mentioned, that I am opposed to the bore going in the Greytown Memorial Bars. Today, I'd like to explore the history of the memorial bars with you, give you feedback on the consultation by Wellington Water as a resident and community board member, and to finish off with my recommendations and any questions you may have. Start off with a photo. This is a plaque that's erected outside the memorial bars. It has names of the 20 fallen soldiers from 1939 to 1945. I have picked two names from the plaque to touch on today, if I can see. That's the lights outside. With the help of Wairarapa Archives, they researched some of the names for me. So the first one I'm going to do is actually from a family that lives in Greytown. This is the Dennis family, Al Dennis. This is the photo of Leslie. He served overseas in World War II and died in 1944. It's a little bit of a history about, because we're limited for time, I'll leave some of that. Unfortunately, the youngest sibling, Alfie Nee Dennis, has just passed away late of last year, and I'm sure she would have been able to pass on a lot more information. But he went away to war, came back, married his childhood sweetheart, and despite his illness, he actually died approximately 9 months later. And regarding the bore of the memorial grounds, as I'm sure you're aware, the Greytown Memorial Park, previously known as O'Connor's Bush, was purchased after a significant fundraising campaign by the citizens of Greytown as a war memorial to those who served in World War I. The next big fundraiser followed World War II with a campaign to finance the Greater Memorial Baths. Our great-grandfather, and Frank Dennis, the father of Leslie Dennis, were on the original finance committee. Taking the above into consideration, we are very disappointed with the bore, both existing and proposed replacement on the Memorial Park grounds. It is clear that the citizens of Greytown throughout those earlier years purchased the land and built the various facilities on it for two purposes. One being as a memorial to those from Greytown who lost their lives fighting for their country, and also to provide a recreational area for the town's citizens, both then and in the future. We are sure that at no point they would ever have dreamed an unsightly and intruding large water bore as part of the Greytown Memorial Park facilities. And that was from Brian and Jason Dennis, who live in Greytown. The second name on the list was Riwi, William Riwi, and there's another Riwi, but I'm not sure if it was cousins or brothers. He was 23 and he was part of the 28 Māori Battalion. On the 1st of January, the battalion was 30 miles southwest of the enemy, held at Suti. As soon as the radar frame began to move, the men bolted on the trenches for the side of the strip. And with that warning, the battalion had 7 soldiers killed and 7 wounded the first day. William actually died on the 5th of January, 1943. It's quite heartbreaking to go through some of these stories, but understand the history behind why it's quite important. I would like to focus on my history book, which is the years between Greytown 1878 and 1978. It was actually published in 1986. In 1945, the East Street bars were damaged by earthquakes and a committee was formed and modern bars built in the Memorial Park as a suitable World War II memorial for local men who had not returned. I think 100 left and 20 didn't come back. The bars were officially opened on the 7th of March in 1957. On page 91 of this book, Mr. F. Dennis was with his RB10 did the evacuation for the 100 feet and 30 feet bars, and this was no easy matter as the soil was mainly hard pit metal. On page 93, in later years, other improvements were added, the paddling pool, swimming club rooms, equipment, much of it by community effort. Today, a very attractive swimming complex attracts people from far and near. So respect to the fallen soldiers and our community effort to produce an attractive complex needs to be considered. I would like to focus on the Greytown Swimming Club, one of the users of the complex. I have compiled photos I have obtained from the Greytown Swimming Club Facebook page. I will touch quickly on these and why they're important. And I'll send them down later. But at the shallow end, this is a teaching area. So if you understand, if you're teaching, you have to teach at that end so kids can touch the ground of the pool. At the back, there's a fence there. That's where ambulances come in to access for health and safety, as well as any work that tradesmen will do. The pool covers are removed and rolled over to the grassy area to dry out, and the teaching area at the shallow end of the pool. This is used for school as well as carnival days, which is on Tuesday, and they have the training on Tuesday and Thursday nights, but they have carnival days as well. The children line up on the grassy area in the pool. Standing on the hot concrete will burn children's feet, hence why they're on the grassy area. Note the pool covers are rolled up and placed behind. The grass area next to where they are standing has a picnic table and a shade sail over top of it. The area you can see from the girl on the left to the start of the shade sail will be replaced with a fence of some description. At the time, Wellington Water didn't supply any images. As far as I can see, they have not mentioned what materials the fence area would be. This grassy area is the only area to accommodate cooking sausages at the swimming carnival and meets. It is also the area where families have picnics. It's the only grassed area in the pool complex that we're talking about. Also, I have approached and spoken to Bruce Slater, who's a well-known person who knows his water. This new bore needs to be drilled on the western side next to the existing bore so that the headworks can be interconnected so each pump can be used while the other is running. It is important that the new bore is no closer to the swimming bars as the continuous drawdown and recharge could damage and crack the pool. The old bore was pump tested at 85 litres per second, but council engineers at the time insisted on screening it to 65 litres per second. This was crazy, and it has left no room for extra capacity in the future. In the agenda pack, page 31 onwards appears to be new information regarding the pool complex, and that was not actually presented to us at the Greater Community Board. On page 37, what it will look like, the images are new and probably as a result of the feedback we gave them, which was those images there. That gives us a bit of idea what they were talking about. You couldn't visualize it. I would also like to draw your attention to the April the 13th document. This one here. Submitted to by Wellington Water to the Infrastructure Committee meeting, and pages 8 and 9 I'm referring to. The pages have a table titled at the top, Initial Policy Consultation. It states that those who did not provide feedback were approached several times during the engagement period to ensure they had received the information. This may have been only in the form of an email referred to on page 26 of the document, titled EWE and Community Engagement, engaging with all park user groups through email correspondence. If you go to page 9, there are Greytown Tennis Club, Plunkett, Greytown Campground, Greytown Community Heritage Trust, and Greytown RSA. No feedback was received. I personally rang all of the no feedback received park users, minus RSA, who Louise Brown, our chair, was contacting and will present on. We need to future-proof the memorial bars because the RSA have been granted a new plaque memorial for all soldiers of the war. It was at the Greytown Community Board that I attended. I will read out an email from Ken Ryan, who currently runs the Greytown Campground. I have had no correspondence or consultation from anyone re the proposed works on the new bore behind the swimming pool. This is unacceptable. My concerns are that the work is going to end up being done over my busy summer period, and this combined with the noise of the works being done will affect my income. I'm also unsure because I haven't been consulted in any way if these proposed works will mean the pool is shut down over summer, which will also affect my turnover and income. Ken, Greytown Campground. Wellington Water contacted the Greytown Community Board and offered us a Zoom meeting, which we had on the 28th of this February. Christo, who I believe is the project manager, who was mentioned in the agenda pack, was not actually on attendance to that. Wellington Water had Leslie Reedy from Perceived Strategy and Communications, I believe is a consultant that they were using. The Community Board asked a lot of questions to which Wellington Water, after the Zoom meeting, answered most of these in an email to us. I asked about consulting the Greytown Swimming Club, and the answer given was yes. Upon further questioning, to whom did you make contact with, I was informed they hadn't responded. And I've personally spoken to Ryan Garrity, who is actually the chair of the committee. I expressed big concerns regarding consulting the community on the bore going inside the complex, that the community would not be for this due to it being a memorial bars. I remarked that they should be presenting two options for consulting, to vote or submit on the preferred option. I inquired further in regard to costings and the cost of this consultation, with the reply being she did not have the figures in front of her about the project cost to consult. The question was never answered after our Zoom meeting. Maybe the council could seek that answer from Leslie, the cost of the consultation. The Greytown community care about this town, and I was surprised to see only 4 submissions. 2 are members of the Greytown Community Board. I'm presenting and Louise after myself. William Sloan was one of the submitters who's here in the audience today and didn't say he wanted to speak to his submission, but he has read over the agenda pack, and because it's changed, he's got a couple of amendments that he has given me to present to you guys to read. I don't know if I've got time to read them out.
Well, I suspect no, and we'd probably prefer you to speak to your own submission.
That's why I thought I'd leave it.
And as we're sort of running close for time, have you got
I've already got that.
one final point?
I've got that much, that's all I've got.
Well, I suggest you highlight that.
I was surprised to see only 4 submissions. 2 are members of our board, as I said. To give some perspective, recently Greytown had 2 other submissions to the Fresh Choice consultation where they received 81 and the solar power plant 46. This tells me that the formal consultation undertaken by Wellington Water has been lacking. No mail drop for the residents of Kuratawhiti Street who are directly affected as neighbours. Wellington Water has confirmed by email that their formal consultation was an ad placed in the Wairarapa Times Age for contacting the park user group. I understand that a meeting may have been held, but I can't find a date, and not everyone was invited to attend. The consultation was poorly actioned and resulting in the residents' voices barely being heard. My recommendation moving forward is to put it in the Greytown Grapevine. This is a free reader that goes to every household in town, and most people read it. Here is an example of a flyer that they could have actioned, which has a submission form on one side and the information on the other. That was done with Wahine River Plan and Greater Wellington.
I may interrupt you there if I may, Jo. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the notes that I have taken that you've covered the history of the pool and its meaning. You've referenced the impact that it might have on the swimming club. You mentioned Bruce Slater, who believes the pool may crack if more water is extracted. Did you mention what Bruce's sort of qualifications and status was?
Well, he's been on the Wahine River Committee. The others might be able to add more. He's go-to local knowledge for water and anything water, knows where all the aquifers are. He is your go-to person.
And then lastly, you covered your thoughts on the quality of the consultation. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Just to acknowledge what a huge amount of work that you've done. That's really good, and to see so much passion for the history of Greytown. I think that comes across really strongly. One of the things I just want to clarify for myself in my reading the stuff with the board, not to take away the importance of the park, but my understanding is that if the current board that is there fails, there's a real risk to the water infrastructure for Greytown. Is that something that...
That's what Louise is going to be talking about, the alternative, rather than having the bore in the memorial grounds.
Okay. Kia ora, Jo. Thank you so much for speaking. And although there are only 4, as you said, there are 2 from the Greytown Community Board, and you were both chosen to speak on behalf of a lot of your residents anyway. I'm just wondering though, with regards to, you touched on some of the ones that hadn't, did that include all of the sports, people who use the sports facilities? Or is that, or was it just with regards to the pool?
They and the act
Joining.
Yeah, on the page 8 and 9, they contacted all the others, and that's all the email feedback that the council received on the 13th of April. It was an infrastructure committee meeting received that.
So I've just sent you all one of the emails that has come out, went to the original members of the committee, not to, so just forward you that one from soccer, for football.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, Mayor. I just like to thank you again for some submission that's really informative. But I'm just wondering, in terms of everyone that isn't here, is here that hasn't perhaps got all the documentation, if you might just be able to just give the answer to a question, just the last paragraph summary.
So I want to finish with a reject the proposed bore going inside the pools, and I believe that moving forward, I'd like the council to look at ways that when formal consultation takes place, that it's done a better canvassing.
Any questions from the right, from the left? No. Thank you very much. We appreciate the time and effort that you put in. Thank you. Right, so the next matter is.
You leave your submission so we can read it.
Is Louise. Hi Louise, welcome. And you may be being accompanied by Graham, is that right or not?
You had indicated that
No, that's
Because
fine.
we were the only ones that were able to
Yep.
speak, so I have material on behalf of that.
Okay, thank you.
But I mean, I'm sure you'd be happy to read it some piece.
Well,
Thank you. That's good afternoon, councillors, mayor, public. My name is Louise Brown. I am the chair of the Greytown Community Board, and my submissions were filed on support from the Greytown Community Board. As you're aware, Your Honor, your worship, mayor, sorry, used to being a lawyer. When the hearings became known and that submissions had been filed, there was a large group of individuals who felt that they had no knowledge of the consultation period. And I think that is reflected in the indication from Wellington Water when we had our meeting with them on the 20th of February, that there was going to be a much more extensive attempt to communicate with the key members of the community. I have two people that I have material from. The first I have was obtained from Graham Gray. Now, Graham Gray is a previous community board member. He's also a previous Trustlands Trust. He's currently Cobblestones Museum Trust. He's been involved with the Heritage Trust in the Woodside. And I think it's safe to say that he's a very key member of the community who's been involved in very large projects. And he asked if he could speak, but because he hadn't been able to file the written submissions, it was indicated that he couldn't. And I'm just bringing up his words. So,
Can I just interrupt there? Is there anything in our standing orders that
no,
advise us to?
I'm not quite sure that I think that is what I said either. I invited Graham to join, but
I know, but is there anything in our standing orders that would stop Graham coming in after Louise has spoken?
I-
If we allowed it?
we'll just do a double check.
But, you know, Graham's got a lot of knowledge on this
Yeah.
topic,
Mm.
which would be valuable for the.
Well, I will take a motion that we allow it,
I'll certainly propose that.
and I will.
Mm.
Councillor Galloway, so.
thank you. Then on that basis, then I will,
Favour?
Aye.
Yep, thank you.
then on that basis, I think I'll leave Graham to speak to his words.
Thank you.
And then I'll speak. The other person that I've spoken to, and I don't know if they wish to hear from, and who's also here, is Vicky Eckford from RSA. So I do have a communication from RSA, and they are very adamant that they received no communication or attempt or consultation for this, which is quite disappointing given that the intended bore is to go into a monument for World War II. So one would have thought that they would have at least been the priority. They have indicated that they obviously support good, healthy water for Greytown, but they have great concerns about the location and the disruption, because right now the planned disruption has been indicated to be during their queue times, which is Anzac Day. And they also want to be sure that any of the changes don't disrupt where their centrograph is meant to go. And I understand that a photo and location has been sent through to the council, and perhaps Councillor Plimmer can assist with that. But that is quite there. So I think it's the main things is to understand that they, and I'm looking over to ensure I'm not missing anything, because I don't want to misrepresent that they were not consulted in any way. I'm going to take that now then to my submissions. And essentially what I want to do is pull back up the document that we all have been looking at and speak to their proposal. My main submission has been in my submissions is that I feel Wellington Water has not been fair in the way that they have presented the options. They've made it very much sound like Curritucky won't have water, and they very much focused on this area. But the reality is, as they've indicated, is that if this new board does not go in, they are concerned that the water pressure across Greytown would have the problem. See, that's the point, is that we have another water treatment plant. That is Waiohini. Because of our meeting with Wellington Water, the Greytown Community Board had great questions raised as to the reality of this and to that. And for that reason, we had a tour of Soldiers Memorial Park and the Waihikini. And that was a very informative one because it's during that time when my information that I've submitted came out, which is they do have 2 bores at Waihikini that aren't doing full function. And their own people have suggested that just drilling next to those bores would increase that flow. So the water flow that we are saying we can't get anywhere else is available. It just needs to be looked at in an entirely different location, which is where you have those 4. They have 1 tank that does very well, which is bore 4. 1 and 2 are not at full capacity and could be re-drilled next to. And there's another bore, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact details on that because we were walking on a tour. But that is one of the key things I think we need to look at is what is the option? Because that seems to be the concern that's being put in. We have put forth and very strongly do put forth, and I appreciate that they've covered off in their submissions that it's not part of the reserve area, but how do you miss the point of this park, which I think my friend and colleague has pointed out very well, the history, it is the Soldiers Memorial Park. It was established as that. The baths is the memorial for World War II. The gates and the trees are the memorial for World War I, and we have a centograph coming to recognize the other soldiers. That park was meant to be that, and we are continuously looking to take into it. What stops here? They get the new bore, and we need more water. If we don't start looking at the alternative, realistically and financially, there could be more requests for that, and that's not being looked at. Their pictures also, they're not great, and they're not accurate. So if we look at their additional material that you have, I want to first just draw your attention to page 26 and the sketch that they have there. It's a lovely sketch in figure 3 of a bore right next to the tank. That is not correct. If you go down, if you go up to page 25, the intended bore is in your yellow square, and the actual tank container is this red rectangle down at the edge of figure 2. So that's a great distance apart. So while that looks like a very efficient, well compacted together structure, that's not actually what's going to happen. We're going to have from that, a reasonable distance is going to be where the container is. There's going to have to be the pipelines that have been put to the bore, and you're still connecting the old bore. They are not decommissioning that bore. So they're going to do all reconnection to that. So when they say, what else do we do with this contamination thing and how else do we do it? I'm not saying that container with the new to pull out the treatment plant within the baths definitely needs to come out. I mean, if there's leakage in there, the contamination potential in there, I agree 100% it needs to come out. But we don't need a new bore. You can control and treat and turn that into a backup, which it should be, by just installing that container and just focusing on that construction with that old bore. You don't need the new bore. If you go on down to the pictures, because I just want to focus on this so that we can sort of see. Just need to get to the next set. Down. I don't understand on page 32 why they gave you a picture of the old pump, because they're not replacing the old pump. Now, if you go down to page 30.
If I could just interrupt, Louisa. On my page 32 does not have a picture. So that's no, not your, but 33 does.
Apologies, 33. It might be just the way, that's my apologies. I might be scrolling too fast.
Oh, okay.
I did scroll too fast. 33.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if I take you down to page, and I think this is important, page 37, this is where, again, they've given you this impression, figure 1, that it's all compact together sitting there. It's not. You look at that photo that they've created on 37, where they've done using a wall. So we know this has been computer generated. There's like a bush in between. They put a bush in there in between the canoes, and they put grass space in between that covered for that pool. That is not a correct perception of what's being cut in there. You can look, that's about a 6 meter by 12 meter. What the actual destination is 6 meters in and 18 meters down. The lower picture, if you look there, there's no bush. Look how close that wall is to those canoes. Look how little there is grass there, and look how close that sits to that barbecue and that other construction there. That is a more appropriate look of what is actually being expected to go in there. This view that they've created here, figure 2 with the options of fencing, again, even if you look at that, that's 12 meters, that's 12 feet maximum across. That's not, they're not showing that thing. We walked it, we looked at it. They talk about disruption and lack of disruption. And I think the only other area is quite important is I do know that the council is in the process of redoing the pavilion. And that is to be an extension. There's contracts being taken on that. How this is going to interfere with that, how that's actually going to work, I don't think that's been looked at. If you look at your map, again, the main map that we have, I think the best one is on page 25, where you have the pools, have the barbecue area. That is not 6 by 18. That's far down. And you see the red area that they have up there. I don't know why that's red, but I do know it's probably red because that's the extension of where the pavilion is supposed to go. So you can see that this is being compacted into a lot of areas. So I don't think actually the thought process of what's going to go in, the disruption that's going to cause, and then is being accurately portrayed. And I would actually, before the council made a decision, invite the councillors here to actually just go to the baths, walk the 18 by 6 meters. You're going to see, if you look at the pavilion, you're going to realize what this is cutting into and what it's actually, because that's how we saw it. And that's how we've been able to bring it home. So my submissions are to the fact that this is a memorial to fallen soldiers. This whole park is that. It is what I put in. It's a place to be recreation, to remember, to just pause. That for some of us who've had military grandfathers, when you look at those trees and you look at that, it is a meaning that goes far deeper than just that. And that's what I think is important. And we do have a treatment center with options over there, and it hasn't been explored. Those are my submissions.
Yeah. So if I can just cover what I think were your main points. You started by mentioning that you were led to believe that there would be much more extensive consultation with key community members than there turned out to be. In particular, you raised the issue that the RSA, who obviously have a significant feeling for the park, received no communication at all. And that you report that they are also upset by the prospect of a war in the memorial, particularly its location and its potential disruption. You then went on to say that you were concerned about the way the options were presented, primarily because another option, namely at Waiahine, has not found its way into the document. And you talked a little bit of almost, in fact, you named the bores, I think, by number. So I apologise, it doesn't exactly resonate with me, but I think I got the general picture. Then you went on to say that some of the pictures in the consultation document on page 25 and 37 in particular, you feel are misleading. And lastly, you mentioned that no consideration in the diagrams or the plans appear to have taken account of the new pavilion that's also going in. So I hope that's a reasonable summary of what you said. And as before, we will invite councillors' questions.
I don't know, thank you. That was, yeah, absolutely. Well done on the amount of information. The fact that Greytown Community Board has been very forward in finding out and speaking to those within your community on who have it, this is affected, so or may affect, I should say, in the future. So I just wanted to check with you. In your submission, you actually state here that the Memorial Park was never intended to be more than a backup.
That's how it was initially put forth to, and I think Graham Gray will speak to that himself.
Mhm.
One of the reasons why I haven't gone into it more, but it has initially always been meant to be a backup and not a intended permanent use, but it continues to be.
Whereas the Waihine
The
was for specifically for
Greytown, and then it became, and then it's also been adapted to include further study.
and in your walk with Wellington Water around the Waihine treatment plant, you've just noted here that there that perhaps like bore 1 and 2, which are inefficient depths at this time, could perhaps be looked at
At a more efficient depth,
to
to get a better flow.
get them
They're the original bores, aren't
I think
they?
they,
Or is the one that was done last year?
force one.
and that's the one who, and I think, and you look at the data that FOR is doing at a different depth, it's bringing in a much greater amount of water. And if you were able to bring 1 and 2 up to that, you would,
Mhm.
it would, my understanding from what was said to us, it would cover the capacity that's required. And that in actual fact, possibly current to PD, and those bores wouldn't even be needed.
So then
So it could really become a backup.
it could actually be the backup for, okay. That's, thank you.
Councillor Gray.
I think we,
No, I was just wanting to thank Louise for that brilliant piece of analysis. It was very, very informative. Thank you.
so through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for coming in. And again, really great to hear the passion for the community and the amazing part that you have. Just to go back to what you're talking about with the Waihine water treatment plants, on page 34, it does talk about the alternatives or what alternatives have been considered. And it talks specifically about the Waihine plant there, about how that they could update that to deal with the hydraulic constraints, is the terms that they use here, but that process, so it would require the replacement and upsizing of many water mains throughout Greytown and will take many years to complete. Is that when you talk about having the bores at a different depth, is it your understanding that that would mean that that work doesn't need to happen?
I think I think that work, to speak to that directly, I think is obviously requiring more of an engineers to come into it. But my understanding ultimately though is that the water piping through Greytown is dated and aged and needs to be upgraded. So whichever direction you were to go to with the bore, I don't think that is going to change. So I think that's a constant. So it shouldn't necessarily impact the decision of where it goes, is my submission.
So, and again, I guess this, my take home so far from this hearings process is that we probably need more information and, to look into the consultation process that's happened. But my understanding is that the current bore is no longer fit for purpose and at risk of imminent failure. To upgrade the Waihine portion would take a long period of time and a bigger investment. And that the proposal to have the work done in the park now is to mitigate the risk of Greytown losing supply before, in the meantime.
What they're saying, my understanding, the way I've taken it, I'm just trying to find a page just to point that I wanted to focus. I think it's right here. If it took you just to page 18, I think that just, and if you look, the context and the two elements, there's two elements: installing a new bore to ensure continuity of water supply and installing the new water treatment plant. Now that is the container.
So you're saying that container, it's the bore that you're objecting to, the container is.
They've
As it's
created the
being
container, it's there.
Yeah.
That's what they need to continue. If they are to at all treat the current bore, they need that container no matter what, because the current treatment plant is inside the memorial baths,
Yes.
apart from another container that's outside, which is then only set up for, I think it's where they hold the, it's very large sodium things that come from Pori Road. I can't think of the solvent, but I can remember it comes from Pori Road and it only can come from Pori Road. And it's a big,
Soda.
there we go. So what they're doing is the container that they've created, as I understand and look at, is that it pulls the treatment that's within the baths. That part that's there, as well as the UV part that's also there. So, and that's all gonna go into that container. And I'm saying they've already built that structure, that it's already been approved, it's there. There's no difficulty with that, but what they want is the additional bore so they can hook up to that bore
While they repair. the-
when they put that in, well, I think what they're also doing is just putting the pipes to the new treatments. You see, that's what I'm saying, is what they're doing is they want to put that in, they have to hook it up. To hook it up, they have to not use the bore because they have to go down into the pipes and turn it on. So that's where they're saying the water supply will decrease during those 3 months to do that. So what they want to do is build the bore, have that hooked up there, all that piping done.
So ready to go.
Then they'll unhook and then do all the new piping. So what I'm saying is instead of putting that bore there to cover the supply that you need for while you're ultimately going to connect this new bore to this treatment center, look at drilling somewhere else for a different bore, not there.
Okay. Would you long-term, and this is totally not in any of the agendas that we've been given, but would you long-term support the removal of all water infrastructure in the park and that potentially looking at going to a different place like Waihine in the first instance would better facilitate the removal of that?
I think if they looked at the treatment and better structured the bore and what they had there and looked at utilizing more of the water supply from that area, we may be able to not have to have it there. It needs to be canvassed and looked at.
Right, any other questions, councillors? Okay, thank you very much, Louise. We're
Thank
very
you for the
grateful for your
opportunities.
time and effort. And Graham Bray, if you,
Can I just get Amanda to get Stefan over? I'm surprised Stefan's not here.
oh, okay, excuse me, Amanda.
Can we get
Councillor Plummer,
Can we get Stefan over here? Because it's hidden paper and got some questions of him.
Go on Zoom.
Is he not in the office?
Yeah, he said that he needs to be in on Zoom. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So Graham, please take a seat and look, this may come as a little surprise to you. But, well,
Thank you, well, nice. Here we go.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome, bro.
Thank you very much for giving the name of this opportunity. I was not expecting this. I feel very good that I'm allowed this opportunity to speak to what I had sent to Louise. I have to admit that I never seen the publications in the paper. I knew there was to be some work done up there, but I hadn't seen the resource consent, and I just not picked it up until I was notified a week and a half ago. But I'll just go back to March last year when I was on the community board. I met on site there with Bryce Neems because we were arranging the lines, the gradient lines to paint the rails across in front of the bars and within the area. And Bryce, in that time that I met there with Bryce, he said, this is what we're planning to do, which is reallocating the infrastructure, putting it in the container, putting it around the corner, out of sight, and just leaving the little shed for the well as that's trying to tidy it all up and make it look respectable. And thinking of what the RSA were doing in building their new war memorial as well. And I said to him, that is a very fantastic move. So I'll go back a step and say, I feel as a resident of Greytown and fourth, fifth generation, very insulted that we are at this point again, which was at about 30 years ago, which the community gave very instructions to the engineer at the time. We did not want that well in front of those bars. And unfortunately, he just ignored the community and went ahead with it. He tried to employ local contractors to do the work, all refused, wouldn't have a bar So he had to bring contractors in. And so here we are again. And so I'm very familiar with what happened back then. Remember it very clearly. So I feel very insulted that we're back at this point again. As a in the community, I tried to get other people to come to this meeting, but unfortunately, the notice I had, everybody had already had prior arrangements. But I never found one other resident that I spoke to that had picked it up and realised what was being planned in our war memorial. So I have done some physical work as well myself. I about 25 years ago put a bore in Mole Street to service an orchard, and the information that I was given then, which I've been in the fire service. My father had been in the fire service and understands water, undergrounds and all that. And if you don't understand how water underground works, it works in rivers, just like we have on top of the ground, you have the same thing underground. So you can move several metres one way, several metres that way, and you pick up strong water supplies again. So the wall I put in Mole Street in a straight line from where the current well is would be about 80 metres. And I picked up strong water supply. That bore was also then used to measure for the current bore that is there now. And so, and also bores in the orchard on the north-hand side was used as well. So in saying that there is no other location for this well, I do not totally accept. You can take, back in the history of the first bore, the engineer at the time was offered land free of charge to be used to put the infrastructure on in the rural area of the west side of Greytown, and he refused to accept it. So going forward, coming back to today, I've been up and I've done some measurements. So if this bore went in the location that has been proposed, it would end up approximately 5.5, 6 metres away from that swimming pool. The swimming pool was built in 1957. It was hand mixed, and the steel at that time, because I've looked at a extension that was done at the hospital at the same time. There's photos in our history books to see if there was anything there to see how far steel rods were at that time. Built at the same time, this extension at the hospital built at the same time, and clearly a photo there showing all the steel work and everything. And in terms then, the steel rods would be a yard apart. So you're looking that yard apart, steel rods, not this close like they are today. I talked to an engineer on Sunday and he said there'd be no doubt that that pool would crack with the vibrations of putting a well in that location. So,
Do you mind sharing the name of that person, or is that confidential?
well, he's a long-term resident of himself.
Yeah.
And I'd rather that not be published.
Sure.
I don't mind giving you his name, but I wouldn't like it to be published because he's not a witness.
Well, this is an open
Okay.
thing, so.
You don't need to give it.
Okay, because I think to be respectful, he should be I should ask him what he wants. Yeah. So we got that. Yeah, he insisted the bars will crack, and it wasn't that many years ago. I'm just trying to think how far it might have been only 6 or 7 years ago. There was quite a lot of work done on that pool because there was leakage identified. And then I also, so it was only about, I think if my memory's right, about 3 years ago, Wellington Water told the council that the sewer line from the bars to the Kutawhiti Street was too close to the water main feeding the town from this well infrastructure, that it had to be moved away because of the risk of contamination. So that was done. But now the pipework from this new location is going to have to run alongside that sewer line, I estimate about 2 metres. It'll either then have to cross over it or under it to connect to that water main. So we're back to the risk of contamination. And why would Wellington Water at that time tell the council that there is this risk if there was a limited lifespan in this well? We're not talking 10 years ago. We're talking only, I was estimating only about 3 years ago. If a well does not deteriorate in that short time, was there investigation done at that time to see the lifespan of that well before that money was spent? That question I don't know. The well that was put in, that current one, that was put in there as a backup in case Waihi failed. But also, the other reason behind it was because the failure of the Borbush Gully infrastructure for Featherston was failing, and so the answer was to put a main in from Woodside. So if you put this well on the other side of the Taranaki River, which I'm sure you'll find water, connect up to that pipeline. For a start, you wouldn't have the problem of the pipe going under the Taranaki River, which you had to spend several $100s last year to repair, and you wouldn't have a problem with Great Hounds water. Oodles of supply. So I'm not reading what I've done here. I'm just going on what I remember. So I'll wind up and say, which I said before, I feel so insulted. And if there was a community meeting held, I'm sure you'd get a huge response from our community. And well, my recommendation was, I don't know whether Louise got it here or not, you get a second opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham. So if I just summarise what I think you said, firstly, that you never saw any of the advertisements, which were, I think, in the midweek at the Wairarapa Times Age. In fact, you only heard about it, even though you're clearly someone interested in these sorts of details. You only heard about it a week ago. However, a year ago, you'd been at a meeting with Bryce Neems, who had described the planned tidy-up for the area, which isn't what I think you are saying possibly about to happen. And you, in fact, you've commented that you feel insulted that we appear to be repeating sort of ground that's been trodden over before. And you come on to mention the fact that the pool that's there already has experienced leaks, and I think you said 6 or 7 years ago it obviously had some sort of repairs, but I think you're saying there is some fragility there because of the nature of the reinforcing steel, and you would expect that if there was a new bore being ground nearby, that possibly the pool structure would be compromised. Now, you, not quite lastly, you mentioned that the new bore will require a pipe to go near a sewer line, the existence of which has already created a change of site, nothing else already. And just to quote, you do not accept that there is no other location. And you've just mentioned one then, that a bore on the Featherston side of the Tauwharatika River would provide water to Featherston and leave the Waiahine bore available for Great Hounds. I think that's a reasonable summary. I hope you'll agree. And councillors, I open up to you.
So can I just get clarification on one of the things you said? So your understanding is that that they 3 years ago that actually already moved one of the pipes because they felt that the sewer line was too close, so they'd moved it. But now where they're looking at putting it, you believe is actually once again putting the new pipe nice and close to the sewer line that they've already removed once. Is that right?
Yes, to bring the line from the new pipe, if they put the well at the back of the bars, then the pipe will have to come to the container, then the pipe from the container to join into the current water main, it then goes out onto Kurutawhiti Street. Yes, well, it will be either running along, well, I believe it will have to run along, but then it will also have to either it'll intercept it at some point and it'll have to be above it or below it, to join into the water main. That's the new pipe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Couldn't blame me.
Thank you for coming to talk to us on very short notice, being up from the crowd. Popped on stage, so yeah, he did very well. I've got 2 points that I'd like to make. And they're going to sound a little vexatious, but I promise they're not. It's just to get an idea of, I guess, the feeling around this. So we've heard a lot about how important the Soldiers Memorial Park is, and that there's pretty clear steering from the community to leave it alone. If we were to, from the deliberations today, go back to Wellington Water and say, not acceptable, do something else, there's going to be two parts to that. One is that they would need to come up with a new project, which would have a big cost that goes with it. And I'm sure you're aware, we've just had some pretty difficult rate rises that we've had to put through, and a big part of that rate rise was from water costs. So it would be potentially putting further costs onto the community to come up with a new project, which I don't know how much that would be. That's for a future discussion. And so that there would be a delay as they develop a new project, bring that to fruition, get it where it needs to go. And my understanding is that the infrastructure that they have at the moment is past its use by date and at risk of imminent failure. And the longer we wait.
Excuse me, councillor. I fear that you are getting quite close to what might be called a debating point rather than asking a question on Mr. Gray's actual submission. So if I could just steer you back, do you have a question on the submission?
Do you think that the risk to Greytown of losing their water is high enough for us to take extraordinary measures, or do you feel that that risk is not what it's been made out to be?
There was always a risk. Whatever you did, there's always a risk. So I don't believe it would take very long at all to locate another location. As far as the cost goes, it's not going to cost any more to put a bore down here or to put a bore down there, whether it's in the Greytown boundary, whether it's in the Featherston boundary, whether it's some other location. The cost to put the bore down is exactly the same. You've got the infrastructure in a container that can be picked up by a truck and a HIAB and be put here or put there and put there. The cost is exactly the same. So cost in it, I don't believe, is an influence.
Could I add, and you didn't think it would be hard to find another location?
I don't believe so. Don't believe it all. Because, as I explained, we have streams of water, rivers of water in our underground, and they're only, well, I just explained the one that I had put down was only about 80 metres from where the current location is. And so you could go, but a water engineer can locate that within days. It doesn't have to be months, it can be within days. Could locate another location. You take from the Waihinui River to the Taraniki, and you've got underground streams all the way across. Feeds from the hills to the Rimahanga, you've got underground streams. And it's a matter of what points you just pick up those streams.
Councillor Plummer.
Yeah, Graham, thanks for that. And I'm pleased you're here today. Can you cast your mind back to when we were on the community board together and we were briefed on the role of bore 4? Yes, that's the new one that's just been commissioned. Now, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that bore should suffice for all the water needs of Greytown and Featherston on its own.
Yes, that's right.
That's what we were briefed, wasn't it?
We were told that, yes.
Thank you.
That was the very reason why the fourth one was put down, and I think they actually went deeper, the information.
Great, thank you.
And may I just inquire what year that?
I think it went in last year. I think it's last year or the year before it was finalised. Last year or the year before.
So we're talking 21 or 22.
Yeah.
Very recent. Yeah. It's been on the plans for a long time. We finally got it across the line.
Thank you very much.
Just my last comment. I'm sure the Martin Borough, which I put in an email, the Martin Borough residents would not accept a bore near War Memorial Square. And I'm sure Featherston would not accept a bore in the middle of your memorial, in the middle of Featherston. I'm sure there would be a big kick up, like as if there was a public meeting greater and you'd get exactly the same.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much for the response.
So I'll just explain what I'm going to do right now. If I understood Louise Brown correctly, she left an amended submission from William Sloan. And
This is here, is that Louise?
That was from me, it was from me.
oh, okay.
Oh,
So
it's from you, yes. But
can I have it, please?
yes. This one here, is that? If I-
It's there somewhere.
The top page.
Thank you. All right.
Chair, could I also, please just add to the record that, I forwarded the email from Gary Hewson, who was from football to all, and now those of you who got your computer will see I just forwarded it today. And I've also forwarded, very kindly from Vicky Eckford, who has sent a photo of the actual location that the proposed RSA memorial will be situated.
Thank you very much. Make a note of that. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is just read out William's amended notes. Then after that, we have a presentation from Wellington Water. And then after that, I'm going to have an adjournment. So point one, the report references network restraints using the Woodside source alone, requiring significant upgrading and some time to complete without any resilience should the supply be interrupted. Note that the Woodside supply provides additional treated water storage, which would be available to the Greytown community should the Kuratawhiti supply fail. In this sense, the Woodside supply does in fact already provide a degree of resilience to Greytown as well as a primary supply to Featherston. Point two, it is believed more work is required to discount the Woodside upgrade possibility entirely, as referenced in my submission before the new bore proposal is adopted and delivered. Now, duplication to an extent, duplication of infrastructure to an extent is a luxury that needs to be examined carefully and considered in the context of overall community affordability in terms of capital and ongoing operational costs going forward. Service levels need to be an important part of the overall consideration. I'm not sure that the 300 to 500K quoted on page 11 of the April reporting to Council is an accurate reflection of the total estimated bore establishment costs, including those of associated water treatment. Consideration has not been given to the location of a new bore infrastructure at the Soldiers Memorial Park, rather than the justification for the proposal. So those are the updated comments from William. And now we come, I believe, to Lawrence Edwards. Thank you. So Lawrence, you're very welcome. And just as I gave the other admitters slightly more than 10 minutes, I shall do the same for you. Thank you.
Might be the best I can do with that. Is that okay? So you can just scroll up.
Cool, thank you. Okay, tēnā koe, ko Lawrence Edwards, tōko inwana. Ko aho te tino rangatira, kai tōtou mo te wai inu, ko Wellington Water aho. Hello, my name's Lawrence Edwards, and I'm the Chief Advisor for Drinking Water at Wellington Water. I think we said we had about 5 to 10 minutes, so I plan to quickly run through the presentation and have time for questions at the end. So we've provided a summary report of the submissions that have been received, and this presentation aims to provide some background proposal and to address some of the key aspects that were raised in those written submissions. So the hearing today is, of course, for proposed new bore for the existing Memorial Park treatment plant, and in particular for the location of that proposed bore. And it's really important to understand why the bore is needed, why it's so important, and really what the consequences are if the bore is not installed at the treatment plant. So in essence, this is about ensuring a reliable supply of safe and healthy drinking water for Greytown. So safe and healthy drinking water is our #1 priority. Wellington Water, and I'm sure it's here with council priorities as well. The current treatment plant that's at Memorial Park doesn't meet the drinking water standards, and that means it's not currently meeting expectations of the standards set by Taumata Arowai, the drinking water regulator, and is a key project for us to address that issue. If the bore is not running, the supply pressure to Greytown is insufficient for day-to-day use and for firefighting supply, particularly at the extremities of Greytown. And the main reason for that is the hydraulic constraints between the Waihini treatment plant and Greytown. So effectively, the pipes are too small. So we spoke about the bore issue earlier. That does provide additional resilience and capacity for both Featherston and Greytown. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve that problem, which is why further upgrades would be needed, as we'll talk about later on. But the bore itself is an important part of that whole upgrade, and I'll explain why in the coming slides. So during the daytime, the demand for drinking water in Greytown is such that it cannot be supplied from the Waihini water treatment plant alone without compromising pressure and flow for domestic and firefighting use. The existing pump and the treatment facilities are very old. They're basically in constant use. They're in very poor condition, and they're increasing risk of failure effectively at any time. So you can see the condition of the pump in the photograph there. So every single day, Greytown is reliant on that one single pump for its security of drinking water and fire supply, other than the supply from the Waihini treatment plant, which, as I mentioned, is subject to those hydraulic constraints between Greytown and the treatment plant. So effectively what that means is if that pump fails, the extremities of Greytown will have domestic supply and firefighting supply issues until either we can replace the pump and get that back up and running. So commissioning the new treatment plant will be problematic for us using that one bore, because we would need to use the water from that bore to commission the new treatment plant. While we do that, of course, we wouldn't be able to supply Greytown. So again, same issue. So installing a new bore really mitigates all those risks. It allows us to take this bore offline. It allows us to replace the pumps. It allows us to redo all the headworks, get new pumps in there, which will be much more reliable, less likely to failure, and at the same time, commission the new treatment plant offline without impacting the supply to the community. So in terms of alternatives, so as you know, 2 treatment plants can supply Greytown, the Waihini plant, which also supplies Featherston, and the Memorial Park bore. I think I mentioned earlier about the hydraulic limitations, which effectively mean during effectively every day at high demand periods, Greytown relies on this bore. So there aren't any other current treatment plants that are available to supply Greytown. So upgrading the network is another option. So upsizing those pipes between the Waihini treatment plant and Greytown will take a number of years and will be very expensive. but is an alternative. And so finding a new reliable source. There is aquifers that run beneath Greytown, and in particular this one that we are drawing out of at the moment, which is a reliable source, but drawing from that from another location will require drilling more bores, potentially another 2 would be our recommendation for the same issue, for having to commission the treatment plant offline. So again, you have the additional cost and the time that's going to be involved with actually doing so. And the additional connecting infrastructure that would be required to do that. You also have other issues to consider, like chlorine contact time, making sure that you have enough time for the chlorine that's added to the water between the treatment plant and the Greytown network for that chlorine to do its job and make sure we provide safe and healthy drinking water, which again is an additional cost. And the existing Memorial Park upgrade is effectively consented. So, for us to upgrade the treatment plant as it's currently proposed, the new bore will need to be in reasonable proximity to that and to the existing bore. So in terms of options considered on or nearby the existing treatment plant, so 5 locations were considered. So the green location that's shown on the plan there, it's the first site next to the bore, is ruled out effectively because it's got the potential to interfere with the existing bore during drilling and operation. And it risks impacting the quality and the quantity of water needed to maintain adequate supply for Greytown. A site next to in the pavilion car park, next to the red dot there, which was the preferred site, was initially preferred but ruled out due to the plant pavilion extension work. And 3 other sites were considered, but also ruled out, as these would impact either on the protected trees in the area or on sports field operations. So the preferred site is just inside the pool complex on the grassed area next to the toddler's pool, while the bore and the above ground pipework will take up an area of around about 18 meters squared, so approximately 3 meters by 6 meters. It's proposed that would be fully fenced off from the swimming pool and not visible or accessible from the pool complex itself. And in summary, each site has its benefits and its weaknesses, but on balance, we consider this location provides the best outcome. But in terms of how this will impact the park and the baths, so construction is planned to start as soon as possible after obtaining consents and be programmed to minimize impacts on the pool open season. So we anticipate that the impact on day-to-day pool operations will be fairly minimal. The bore and the associated above ground pipework will take approximately 3 meters by 6 meters. Be fully isolated from the swimming pool itself, so you won't be able to see or access the bore from the pool complex. The shaded grass seating and the barbecue area will continue to be fully accessible from the pool complex. The treatment plant itself will be discreetly located to the side of the Memorial Park baths and will allow all temporary containers from the car park area that are there at the moment, fairly unsightly, to be removed. And in addition to that, we will be able to remove the existing very poor condition chemical storage and dosing room from within the Memorial Park building itself. And this will also enable the car parking to be returned to the community, and a portion of the chemical room in the swimming pool that's currently used for treatment plant purposes will be decommissioned, fully removed, and enable some expansion or redevelopment of the pool itself. But we have put together a few images of what we think it's likely to look like. So these are indicative views from inside and outside the pool complex. The bore and the treatment plant, as I mentioned, will be fully fenced off from the pool. We have shown some indicative screening options, which could be either or steel, but they're to be confirmed. But again, you won't be able to see or access the pool, the bore from the pool complex.
Could I just ask on that picture there, with the top right-hand one?
Yep.
With that somebody standing in the pool looking at that?
Yeah, I think that's.
What does view from inside the pool mean? Sorry, I don't quite understand.
When you look at that, okay?
The one on the right, seeing the view from inside the pool.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pool is here.
Yeah, so I guess
It's essentially, if you're in the pool, that's what you see.
Jump that way, that's the pool.
Yeah, gosh, that's
So this area here,
quite a view.
this is where it's currently co-located for
Yeah.
swimming and so on.
Yeah.
So I guess the intent of the photo though is to show how we can screen the bore and the pipework so that it won't be from inside the pool area.
All right, okay, yep.
In terms of benefits, as I mentioned, safe and healthy drinking water is our number one priority. This will allow the treatment plant to be compliant with the standards. Once the upgrade is completed, will provide a more reliable and operationally resilient supply for Greytown as a whole. If the bore were to fail, there would be another one that's available for use. Will allow either bore to be taken offline for operation and maintenance without impacting supply. Will allow the chemical storage room to be removed and remove all the unsightly temporary containers that are in place and have been there for around about 4 years now. And in summary, if the board doesn't go ahead, the existing treatment plant will continue to be non-compliant until it is upgraded. So the current temporary arrangements that are in place will need to continue in the meantime. We won't be able to commission that new treatment plant online without impacting Greytown's supply. And we would effectively need some acceptance of that for it to proceed. There would be no backup for that existing bore if it fails. So again, those supply issues that would occur for the duration. So and in summary, areas of Greytown will have inadequate domestic water supply and firefighting supply for as long as that bore is offline and or needed for treatment plant commissioning. And then just open for questions.
Thank you. Well, if I can just summarise, Lauren, what I think you said this, you started by mentioning that the pipes from Waiahine are currently too small, that there were costs with upgrading those pipes or drilling elsewhere. You mentioned that the new bore preferably needs to be near the existing infrastructure. You discussed 5 options and why they weren't ideal, and thus why the preferred, what I call the yellow spot, is preferred. Then you came on and discussed the impact on the park and the pool. You showed some images, which I think, to use your term, you said were indicative.
Yep.
And towards the end, you discussed the benefits and the possible consequences if the board doesn't go ahead. So I hope that's a reasonable summary. Thank you. Now, are there questions? Yes, Councillor.
I have a few. Do you want me to just go through them?
I would love you.
Okay. Right. First one, I'll just ask, you talk about water pressure quite a lot, hydraulic pressure. 3 years ago, I think we put a new pipeline from Waiahine to Greytown at considerable expense all the way down Woodside Road. Are you telling us that money is wasted?
So what I'm saying,
Because that that pipe was put in place in anticipation of bore 4 coming online.
I'm not saying that's wasted, no, I'm saying that supplying Greytown from the Waihini treatment plant alone via that pipeline will result in supply pressures. So that's not to say that pipeline isn't of value.
So just taking that to its logical conclusion, we spent this money putting that pipeline on. Bore 4 was sold to council on the basis that it would provide all the water needs for Greytown and that the Memorial Park would then be emergency only. We upgraded that pipeline from Waihini all the way to Greytown. What's changed?
So upgrade of that pipeline must have occurred prior to Wellington Water being on board, but that it is true to say that that board does provide, in addition to the storage that's been commissioned at the Waihini treatment plant, will supply both Featherston and Greytown. The issue is the hydraulic constraints through that pipeline to Greytown, which mean that that would need a further upgrade were you to supply Greytown from the Waihini treatment plant alone.
Okay, so that's telling me that what we did 3 years ago is wasted.
I don't.
To Wellington Water coming on.
And it wasn't prior to
Because
Wellington Water.
He didn't come on until after Wellington Water
So it was done while I was here.
Yeah,
Okay, so it was under Wellington Water's
I
due.
disagree that it's wasted though.
Well, it is. If pump 4, which was sold to us, which would supply all the needs
That's
for Greytown and Featherston, if we've put in too small a pipeline on the advice from Wellington Water, which now causes a problem that you now want to put a new bore in, that's a significant problem.
The other issue you need to consider as well is that if something happens to the Waihini treatment plant, or if there is a failure of that pipeline between the Waihini and Greytown.
I'm coming on to failures. Okay, coming on to failures. Just last year, we commissioned the reserve backup for water storage at Waihini at considerable cost. We brought online the new storage, as you know, and you just said today there is no backup, there is no storage supply. Well, we just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars lining a storage facility at Waihini for that specific event.
So not without the hydraulic constraints. So it will supply Greytown, but you will, at the extremities of Greytown, you will have reduced supply pressure and flow.
Okay, let's say we don't supply Featherston from Waihini. What is the effect on Greytown for a start? Because I'll get to what Graham raised before.
Same issue.
Right, so that I come back to that pipe issue that we put in, that we have put in too small a pipe is what you're telling us. No matter what way you cut this, we put in too small a pipe. Is that what you're saying?
Prior to Wellington Water coming on board?
No, it's not prior to Wellington Water coming on board, because the pipe was put in before I even, as I came on council, because I remember driving up the road, watching the pipe being put in. And that's only about 3 years ago, is that right, Graham? Yeah, so it is during Wellington Water's tenure. Okay, well, we'll forget that one anyway. Okay, can we go back to the picture of the pool?
Sorry.
Okay, well, you all saw it. So currently, using Joe's presentation, currently Greytown School uses that grassed area for all the kids when they have swimming sports, yeah? And they put up the tents and so on and so forth. Are you telling me that if you take 20 metres out, there's still going to be room there for 400 to 500 kids, knowing that Greytown School is growing?
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I can answer that. The answer is no. In terms of the pool structure itself, we've heard from Graham that any bore going in is likely to damage the structure of the pool. Has Wellington Water given that any consideration? And if so, are you willing to indemnify the council of any cost that goes with repairing the pool?
So the new bore that we're going, we're proposing a submersible pump that will have very little vibration.
You've got to drill the bore.
You need to drill the bore.
That's the issue that Graham raised, is drilling the bore will break the pool.
Yep.
Did you consider that in any way in your development?
I disagree that it will damage the
Okay.
But how.
Yeah, that's fine.
That decision, I don't know.
Okay, given that.
Do you mind if we just come to the table?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Brothers from GHD projects, I think that might be able to help us.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, so I don't want to just berate you.
participants. So we've got Justine Jones, the technical director on the project, and also Aaron Jeffries, senior planner on the project as well. So Justine was leading a lot more of the consultation activities with the community, and so things like talking about the pool and
Adam, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The submission was made by Lawrence, and we are entitled to ask him questions related to his submission. And that's what we're doing. Councillor Plymouth.
So I'm just want to come back to the water hydraulic pressure. You talk about that for firefighting, but how much of that is now a cause of the expansion of Greytown itself?
Sorry.
So the town boundary has increased. I don't know how many square kilometres. But so when you're talking about hydraulic pressure,
Yep.
How much of that is because of the town boundary increasing as opposed to, where is it,
So I think there's no doubt that the additional bore being installed at Memorial Park in 2005 has boosted the supply pressure, and that has enabled more growth. Okay, the problem is when that is no longer there, you then need to supply from the Waiahine treatment plant again with those issues.
Okay. Last year before, so in the last triennium, we faced a real risk of the Tiranekau pipe breaking. Remember that? Adam, you were there. And we were told that we would get a more permanent solution. It strikes me that whilst we've got a bore that is at its end of life, there doesn't seem to be any strategic view on where we would place this bore, because water can go either way in a pipe, I'm assuming. So
the problem there is, so Featherston is supplied by gravity from the Waiahine treatment plant. We cannot supply from the Memorial Park bore back up through that pipeline and then down.
no, I'm talking about why not put the bore on the south side of the Tiranekau River? You solve iwi concerns, we solve long-term supply for Featherston, and we have a backup should it be necessary to pump back to Greytown. Is that possible?
Not without the same issues that we've just mentioned. So you still got those hydraulic.
Yep, okay, but we've decided that we've wasted money putting in a too small pipe. Where the blame lies on that, I don't know. But it just strikes. Okay, so
Again, I just have to pull that back a bit. I disagree that that is wasted money. Right? It provides an important function. It's just that it will not supply Greytown alone by itself.
okay, but when it was sold to this council, of which Pip and I were members, setting up bore 4, it was to supply Greytown full stop.
So
And that the Soldiers Memorial was literally just going to be the backup. So that was actually what originally was said, and that this Waiahine actually being able to do this and line 4, I'm sorry if I've got the terminology wrong, was going to be the answer to fixing Greytown's issues. But now we are hearing that that's not the case at all.
So the point is they are both important for the reliability of the supply.
Well, I feel that there hasn't been a strategic view on water for Greytown and Featherston. In the last 3 years, we've had a Tiranekau pipe almost explode, washed away. We've got a bore that's not working and not compliant in Greytown, and we've upgraded both secure storage and new pipelines and a new bore in Waiahine, to which case it actually makes no difference to Greytown. So, I know you say that money's not wasted, but when we sit here as ratepayers going, Jesus, we've spent all this money and it doesn't increase our resilience, it doesn't increase our water pressure, it doesn't increase our security. To me, that is the definition of wasted money.
Well, I would disagree that it doesn't do all of those things. I think that it does. The difference is that it doesn't supply Greytown by itself.
Okay.
And that is not part of the overall strategic objective.
Okay, well, that's not how it's sold to council, and it was sold as absolutely becoming the The salt,
Yeah,
bore
that's the
4
main
was
one.
supposed to overtake bore 1 and 2 and supply Greytown and Featherston.
And that the other was a backup, wasn't going, that we needed the two in conjunction for Greytown to have water.
Both are important in the long term for both Featherston and Greytown.
For both Featherston and Greytown, I think you've just raised a really, really good point. Because,
Just check that.
oh, sorry.
So I've talked about the Tiranekau River and this is not a strategic approach. And when you talk about if there's a problem or an earthquake or a blown pipe, probably more risk to the Greytown, to the Tiranekau pipe than there is for a pipe that's underground, I would suspect. But I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to me that the real risk to us as a community is not a little bit of water pressure in Greytown, but a lack of water completely in Featherston. So I just think you guys aren't thinking about this strategically very well. And when I go right back to first thing, and I take Graham's point, 30 years ago, when was the original bore put in, Graham?
2005.
1990s.
Okay, so nearly 30 years ago, it was a festering sore then. It was not popular. And now here we are again. We've had an opportunity to fix this festering sore. And, I live in the community in Greytown, and I can tell you there is nothing more contentious than Soldiers Memorial Park. It is the single most talked about issue, whether you plant a tree there or a shrub. If you stand on something that's wrong, you will be told in no uncertain terms. And I look at your proposals, you've got 5 bores all in Memorial Park. Not once did you look outside. I just think, how can you not understand that the community is so passionate about this particular piece of ground to look, you didn't even give us an option outside. It's all inside. And sorry, right now, I think you've treated the community with almost contempt in the way it's been done.
I think that's verging into debating. So,
But those are my questions. My question is, why didn't you consider a greenfield approach?
So as I mentioned in the presentation we have considered a number of options. And this one we consider to be the least impact.
But they're all options inside the park. That's not greenfields. That's just.
Yeah, but the other alternatives that we've considered are mentioned in the presentation. So.
Councillor Maynard.
My query, and it may help that everyone else is sitting here too. The first one is with regards to how successful do you believe consultation was with the Greytown community? How happy are you with the consultation that you believe happened with the Greytown community?
I answer.
Yes.
Who do you want to answer, Lawrence?
Justine, do you mind?
So we did do we engaged with the community in a number of different ways. We had an informal consultation process where we focused on the community users of the park. They did include the RSA. I have actually reached out to Leslie who ran that for me, and she said that she spoke to Susan DePayne, was it something like that? Sorry, let me just check Susan Van Payne. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her surname correctly. At the RSA, we met with the community board. We met with the Maori Standing Committee to give everybody an opportunity who is directly contacted, directly impacted by the park.
So by that I'm meaning all of the sports communities, including the swimming club, obviously, first and foremost, and everyone on Kura Te Whiri Street who lives there, that the impact for them. So how did you consult with them?
So we didn't do any lettered op on the street itself. We concentrated our engagements with the park users and the user groups.
How did you get in touch with them? That what we heard from everyone that came here today was that the majority of them didn't know.
So all the sports groups, we emailed them, and then if we didn't hear anything from them, Leslie followed up to make sure that they had got the email via phone call or some communication a two-way communication where she got a response.
I guess perhaps we just need to understand who was contacted when we're hearing that the chair of these, the chairperson hasn't received anything, or, was it going through to a secretary, or was it just going to a name that you'd found who used it, or we really need to just make sure, because what we're hearing is that, and what it sounds like to us is that the whole sports club didn't, because she doesn't know, so.
I can definitely provide a list of the people that we contacted for each of the sports clubs, for all of the people that we contacted.
And what the hit rate was, and what the hit rate was, how many of them did you get in touch with? Because there's nothing, and normally something like this, where it's happening on an area of land that is so important to a town, that, we're all small rural towns. We're talking about, there's actually a lot of people who have gone, when you're talking about things as contentious as our war heroes, and they're heroes, every single one, even the ones, especially everyone that came back is one of the ones that didn't. They're all heroes.
Absolutely.
And so, it's that in itself is very contentious. The other thing is as well, with the Tauhera River, I think it's really important, because we understand that Papua didn't know that the wife from Waiahine was actually feeding through to Featherston when the whole thing with the pipe came up. So I am a little bit curious when we're saying that the issue is the fact that it's not enough to feed Greytown and Featherston. And I'm saying, then why aren't we looking at the Featherston side of putting a bore in there to help make Featherston resilient? Why was that not an option that was put here? So
the hearing today was around the bore. Again, we've considered all the alternatives that were feasible for Greytown. We're not putting Featherston as part of this proposal, because the bore that's in place will not supply Featherston. The hydraulic constraints between the Waiahine treatment plant and Greytown are only part of the issue. There are other hydraulic constraints within Greytown that mean the head loss between the Waiahine treatment plant and the extremities of Greytown is part of that issue. So, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's not just that pipeline. It is a number of different pipelines throughout Greytown that would need to be upgraded. There are other means of supply of Featherston if we need to in an emergency. So there are the take-switch supply, the bore bush supply, which has its own quantity and quality issues in particular, which mean we would be recommending not to use that. So there are a number of different issues that feed into that picture.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes, I just was wondering why, when you looked at several sites, other than where that's being proposed now, but they were obviously eliminated very quickly. So some building going to be done there, and the heritage trees and things like that. Just wondered, did you use any of the local kind of water experts to actually identify quickly some other possibilities? It looks like there wasn't enough other possible locations to be considered seriously, because should have been fairly obvious that there was going to be incredible resistance to the site.
Yeah, and we're certainly very mindful of that and seeking to minimise any impact on the park itself. But we have done a range of analysis through the consultancy panel and through the team that we have around the table.
But using the local knowledge, because there's obviously a lot of knowledge that people that have done bores and things like that for years.
Yeah, so taking into account the location of the aquifer, the depth of it, and the extent of that throughout Greytown is certainly a consideration for the team. Yes.
So you really felt that you'd eliminated any other possible suitable sites?
That aren't inhibitive in terms of cost and time to develop. Yes.
But my question is going to be a little bit the same as Councillor McCauley's, because Greater Wellington has been doing an aquifer mapping exercise recently. Did that inform your options?
Yes, it's a consideration. Yes. So, we are aware that that same aquifer in particular is widespread throughout Greytown. So tapping into that aquifer is not the issue, it's the time and cost that we would need to implement such an alternative.
One of the things I just want to go back to what Councillor Plummer raised and what you referred to as the hydraulic constraints.
Yes.
Which is a small pipe.
Small pipes, so
Pipes.
it's not just one pipe.
But to get from that plant to, or from that bore into Greytown,
Yep.
the pipe that brings it in is too small. Is that,
Into Greytown, but then also to the extremities of Greytown, so you've got to understand
the
that
whole pipe network is not,
to the extremities of Greytown, whereas you have a bore in the middle of Greytown which provides increased pressure at a location that's closer to the majority of Greytown. So it's to do with effectively pressure and headlock.
is there a long-term view to potentially, and this would be, obviously well outside of the scope of what we could achieve in decision-making today, but would there be potential long-term to put the bore where you've recommended in the Memorial Park, upgrade what we need to through the Waihini bore and the pipe network, and then remove the bore from Soldiers Memorial Park once the rest of the infrastructure is up and running?
That could be done, yes.
Would that be exorbitantly expensive?
Well, it would take a long period of time. We're talking years for that whole network upgrade to be completed. The beauty of the treatment plant that we are proposing is that it is containerized, so you could move it somewhere else. And that the bore that we're proposing, there's no reason why, if that was the decision, that we can, cap that off in the future and return it to a state similar to what it currently.
So I'm keen to start wrapping this up soon, but I'm aware that there are some final questions. We'll start with you, Councillor Plummer.
Yeah, so you just made a really interesting point there. Talking about hydraulic pressure, and you say there's enough water that can be pumped out of Waihini for Greytown. Why do we need a second bore? Why can't we just put an intermediary pump somewhere on the line to increase water pressure?
So you still have the same issue with the current bore is non-compliant.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm saying forget the bore.
Yep.
Increase water pressure by an intermediary pump somewhere along the network.
It is supplied by gravity from the Waihini treatment plant. So you're effectively doing what you have at the moment, but somewhere else.
Well, why can't you, if it's gravity fed, why can't you increase pressure by a pump either at Waihini or at the bottom end of the Waihini line or whatever? I don't understand why you need another bore when all you're talking about is water pressure.
So we're talking about
something.
We're losing the operational resilience that we have in place at the moment from the Memorial Park as an alternative source from the Waihini treatment plant.
Yeah, but that's different to water pressure. So part of your justification for this is water pressure, hydraulic pressure.
Yep.
Can you fix? Could you fix that by an intermediary pump somewhere?
Well, again, that would be effectively the same bore option, but somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Effectively
Yes.
the same.
Yeah.
At cost and significant expense, absolutely. But we would again be looking at.
I don't understand why there's more expense because the pump's all containerized. All you're doing is drilling a bore, right?
We've got to find a new location. We've got to drill those bores. We've got to put in whatever other equipment is needed in a new location at additional cost. So, and plus time delays and everything else that goes along with that.
I'm not quite sure where the problem with it, and you said earlier that you in your paper that you showed, you talked about alternative sites. I've just gone through your paper. There's nothing about any alternative sites outside of Memorial Park that were considered. That's in your paper. I asked that question. I said, did you consider any other sites out of Memorial Park? And you said, yes, you did. And you discounted them and they're in the paper. Well, they're not.
So the point is that we're looking for something close to the existing bore and the existing treatment plant so that we're minimizing the cost and time. to find a new location, install alternative infrastructure, and the cost and time associated with it. So,
And I appreciate that, absolutely. I understand you're trying to minimise cost, but when you do consultation, I'm assuming that all the people you spoke to, was there anyone that said, yeah, great idea?
No.
No one? Not even one?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, so with that in mind, you've picked a fight with the community potentially by not thinking outside the box a little bit. Is that a,
It was a note from Mana Whenua that they were supportive of a project to increase water quality, but
but not in Memorial
But not a
Park?
Memorial Park.
So, you know, did that not sort of raise alarm bells for you that the community might not be on board with this?
You want to say that?
Well, while you think of that, I think Councillor Maynard has a
No,
question.
I-
You don't,
I-
okay. Well, we'll just give a little extra time. Councillor Morley or Councillor Gray? No. Okay, so this is either your last opportunity to answer the question, or we're about to go to an adjournment.
Anything in there?
I think-
The only comment I guess I'd add to that is that we're looking at an existing bore that's not suitable moving forward, and also a treatment plant which the containerised unit which has been consented a couple of years ago, and we're needing a board to get that commissioned. Otherwise, we're going to have quite significant impacts on the Greytown community to be able to commission that plant. So you know, I guess the hearing committee will want to think about and consider that with regards to the other potential impacts. That the proposed location is definitely not ideal by any means. I guess it's the least impacting of the lot. And
So I guess my final comment really would be, if we were approaching this from scratch and if there wasn't already an existing bore there that had a treatment plant that didn't meet the drinking water standards, would we choose this location? No. The reason we are recommending to the council that we upgrade that treatment plant and install another bore at the same location is to minimise the cost and impact to the community. Okay, so we at the end of the day, if the community decides they don't want it, we can look for alternative locations, other options at additional cost and time delay for the community, but that would not be our recommendation to you.
Well, that provokes a final question from me, which is, did anything in your consultation with the community discuss costs? Because it seems to me you cannot ask the community to express a view on something unless A, they have some understanding of the trade-off. And I would venture that it's quite possible that the people of Greytown might well be prepared to pay extra not to have this infrastructure in their park. I'd be very confident throughout the world that people would pay extra not to have their sacred sites desecrated. And I suspect Greytown are no different to that. So I think unless people do understand what they're being given, in other words, what are the consequences of the choices you're giving people? And unless there's something in there that says you might have to pay a lot more to go elsewhere, I'm not quite sure how people are even meant to make an informed decision. But thank you, Lawrence, for coming and sharing your thoughts. We're very grateful. And now we are going to have a quarter-hour adjournment. Thank you. We will gather together in quarter of an hour. The meeting continues to be an open meeting, so people are welcome to stay.
Nothing personal.
Hey, you did really well.
You did very well. Yeah.
Sorry, it's still.
I understand.
Yeah.